What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans. I'm joined by Aidan and Cammy Anderson for another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. On today's episode, we'll be covering the Nets officially re-signing some players for next season, some training camp additions, the NBA pre-season, and we'll also take a broader look at how the Brooklyn Nets roster as a whole is shaping up. Before we get into it, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans. Check out the website, uknetsfans.com, and follow the pod itself on Twitter at BK to UK Pod. Lads, it's been a quiet week and then a busy week. How's it been for you?
Yeah, it's been quite a strange week. Obviously, we were saying earlier on in the week, we were a bit worried about the kind of news we would have to talk about. There was very little to talk about, but in the kind of space of the past 48 hours or so, things have kind of picked up, so there's plenty for us to talk about, thankfully.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's been quieter than it was last week anyway. I remember last week we were kind of thinking how we're going to fit everything into this podcast, but yeah, no, this week at least we got a wee bit of a flood at the end of the week to give us something to talk about. But no, there's been plenty of talking points because there's not been that much news as well, which means that, yeah, there's always going to be opinions somewhere.
Yeah, there's always something to talk about in Netsland, but yeah, the first order of business, the biggest news I think from this week is that the Nets made it official with their re-signing of I think most people's favourite Net, or top one or two favourite Nets, Joe Harris. Obviously massive contract. 29 years old. He's a career 42% three-point shooter. He averaged 47% in 2018-19. So he really is elite. He's going to earn 16 million next season, going up to 17 million, 18 million, and 19 million. And then we've got him under contract until 23-24, when he'll be 32 years old. We were all pretty high on the fact that Joe Harris had re-signed. What do you guys think about the contract as a whole now that more details have come out?
Yeah, no, it was funny. Was it the same day that we done the podcast last week that the Harris news got announced? So it was pretty fresh at that time. So obviously there's been a lot of information about the actual contract that came out since then. It was a great video as well that we saw from Harris that I think he took like Instagram. He talked about how he couldn't imagine himself anywhere else. I absolutely loved that. Someone that's been here so long as well now, it's nice to see someone talk about the Nets so passionately. Yeah, the contract itself, it's another clever move from Sean Marks in the fact that obviously it's increasing over the next few years. Obviously we are spending so much money at the moment, we're in the luxury tax, so obviously if it increases as we go on, it's nice for Joe Harris as well because it's kind of more and more each year, and it's nice for us because as our contract guarantees get smaller, obviously there's more of an impact on his contract. I read as well that I think it's quite funny because they've got the same thing that Kyrie and KD had, where it's like the really extreme bonuses on the contract. So it's like if Joe Harris gets MVP next year or something like that, then he's going to get this amount of money, and it's that kind of clever contracting where it means that there's not that much guaranteed money on the table that we first thought. Yeah, I think as well, it's so interesting. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen so many tweets from like fans of other teams absolutely slating this contract, going overpaid, and it's like, it's so easy to hop on Twitter and say that, but unless you've watched this guy play, which we do all the time, you'll know how much worth he actually has in this team. It's like going back to, I remember when he won the three-point contest, everyone was writing him off. It was like all the bookies had him like second last, and then we saw what he did. We all knew that he could do that, and we all know that he's going to live up to this contract.
I mean, yeah, we kind of discussed it last week. I think it works out about 4 years, 75 mil, so about average of about 17 and a bit million a year, which I think is a really sound contract. Of Aidan saying about people kind of complaining about the overpayment, but I disagree. I think in this kind of free agent class, it wasn't a very strong free agent class, and I don't think it's necessarily that bad given the impact that Harris has had and kind of the growth he's had in his few years with the Nets. And given that there was seemingly a few clubs sniffing around, I mean, I can understand why we maybe did give him a little bit more money than people would have maybe considered suitable for Harris, but I'm absolutely delighted that we've got him tied down for the next few years. I think the way that we've structured it is very smart, and Aidan had also mentioned the kind of Instagram video that he'd done, and he'd also done that kind of media interview after signing his contract, and a lot of the stuff in that was really good, and I felt it was very genuine. So I'll just quickly look at my notes here and read you some of the comments from that. So one of his first comments was, I narrowed in with the Nets when he was asked about whether he kind of discussed things with other clubs. My number one priority was also to try and come back to Brooklyn. And also shared his belief that we could be a positionless team as well, which is something that we can maybe discuss later on. But as I say, I think it's quite genuine comments. It's easy for players just kind of say this stuff, but I think you can really tell that he appreciates the team. He said he was in kind of Brooklyn the whole off season, and yeah, he just really loves the team, and we really love him too. So I think it's a really good fit.
Yeah, I think that's bang on. One of the quotes that I loved from Joe was, for next season, I've got it just here. He says, "We know it's a long road to where we want to go, and it's about sort of taking it one day at a time and trying to get better, build that continuity, build that chemistry. But at the end of the road, we definitely have championship aspirations, and we would be fooling ourselves if we said that we didn't." So I think it's really, really good that he kind of took the time to acknowledge that they're going to have to find that chemistry, which I think a lot of people have kind of been saying. But yeah, as exactly like you say, I think players say these things all the time, every time they do a new contract seemingly, but it feels with Joe Harris coming from obviously being, I think he was waived by the Magic, and he was right at the end of the bench in Cleveland. So I think coming from that kind of experience and then all of a sudden earning this life-changing amount of money is incredible. So I think that probably makes you a bit more appreciative and a bit more humble when it comes to this kind of stuff. But going back to the overpay thing, like you guys were saying, I really agree. Like, so he's on 16 million for this season, sort of escalating up to 19 million. That, I think that in this day and age, I think that's just NBA starter money. That's just good player sort of average salary. So I don't think it's an overpay at all. However, said that, only Jason Kidd, Darren Williams, KD and Kyrie and Richard Jefferson has ever signed for more money in Nets history. So in terms of the Nets, it's a lot of money. So I think we're all in agreement that it's not an overpay. But do you think there'll be sort of added pressure to sort of play up to that contract, or do you think this kind of makes him play any differently? I don't know. What do you think?
I think personally, I think it speaks a lot for what they plan to use Joe Harris as this year. I mean, I think he's going to be a big player this year for us. I think it also says a lot about Sean Marks' respect for Joe Harris, because I think if you look at the amount of players that we've lost over the years that we thought were kind of staples in the team, it always goes back to D'Angelo Russell. I mean, they invested a lot in D'Angelo Russell when they first brought him in, but when the right moves for KD and Kyrie came about, they were very quick to get rid of him. I think for players like Joe Harris, I think we see how good he is, but I think it shows how respected he is by the team as well. And I think as well as teammates, I think KD and Kyrie will absolutely love to play with Joe Harris. He's going to make their life a lot easier. I don't think it's going to cause too much pressure for him. I think he's the type of guy that's very dedicated. You hear about other players that when it's their contract years, they try a lot harder. Once they get that contract, they maybe don't play as hard as they usually do. But I think Joe Harris is that type of guy that he's going to come out and he's going to give 100% every single night. In the same way that I see kind of guys like Karis LeVert and Spencer Dinwiddie, they got paid, but their game didn't change at all. If anything, they improved because there's that loyalty to the team and a loyalty to the player that may increase their desire to kind of work hard. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't necessarily say that there is any kind of added pressure on Harris to perform. I think obviously we all know that he kind of, it's quite well known that he did kind of take that lesser contract last time round, and if anything, he was underpaid last time round. So really, he's maybe getting kind of paid in line with what he should be. And given the way he's played, and yeah, as Aidan says, we're loyal to these players, and I think it's fair money for Harris. And as Aidan says as well, it says a lot about how we're going to use him. He's going to be a key player for us. We've said so many times in the kind of first few episodes of this season of the BK2UK podcast that he's going to have 150 free shots a game because everyone's going to be focused on KD and Kyrie. So he is going to quite literally be Joey Buckets as we know and love. So yeah, I think it's a great contract and I'm well chuffed with it. And I would have certainly been a lot more upset had he been away than had we paid him a little bit more. So yeah, happy with how it's went.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there. Great to see Joe Harris pulling back on number 12 for the Nets next year. Another player that we're going to be seeing again in a Brooklyn Nets uniform next year is Tyler Johnson. Obviously played 8 games for us in the bubble and in the playoffs for us as well. Averaged 12 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, shooting 39% from free. This is obviously just broke a little while ago. What do you guys think of the addition of TJ to the Nets next year?
I think it's fine. Obviously, we know he's not going to be kind of one of the starters. I think he's a solid enough option. Obviously, a few years ago, before he got that huge contract from, was it the Suns, the kind of $50 million deal, we were seemingly in for him at that time. And obviously, it took a few years for us to finally get our hands on him. Obviously, I think he'd done all right in the bubble given the circumstances. And yeah, I think he's a solid enough option that we can call upon maybe as a second or third option, kind of at the point guard. Or yeah, I think it's sound, as I say, performed all right, and it's presumably a decent contract. I can't say I've seen any of the details, but I know for a fact that it's definitely not that kind of 50 million that he was previously on. So yeah, pretty happy here.
Yeah, I remember, it's funny, if we look back in the Discord chat that we've got with the UK Nets fans, we were all talking at the time saying, oh, we're waving Theo Pinson for Tyler Johnson. It's like, they're kind of putting up similar numbers. Would you not rather have Theo Pinson in there, like for that kind of team morale value? But I'm happy with this one. I really like Tyler Johnson. I think he was a clever pick up in the bubble. At times in games, I thought that it was like he wasn't missing. He was shooting lights out. He's a decent option. I think, as Cammy says, he's probably going to be that third option of point guard this year. And if you look at Spencer and Kyrie's injury history over the last few years, it's a nice insurance to have. I think there's a lot of point guards that have signed for teams on the vet minimum this year that Tyler Johnson would have been a better option. And I'm actually surprised he's not been picked up yet. But yeah, I'm not going to say I was surprised because I felt that they really liked him in the bubble, but I do have that feeling that we are extremely guard heavy now with bringing him in. I wasn't expecting that type of signing to come in, and we'll obviously get onto that later in terms of kind of team depth, but I think it does say a lot about how the Nets are planning on playing this year and how many guards they're going to want to have minutes on this team. And yeah, if he is the third option of point guard, you can't really argue. If someone gets injured, he's going to put up decent minutes.
I think as well, before you jump in, Matt, the fact that Aidan's just said the amount of guards we have, I can't help but feel that there's surely a trade incoming here, because we've said in both of the previous podcasts, we've got about 500 guards. Obviously, Johnson was added, and that's made it 501. So yeah, it's a crazy amount of guards to have, and whether that is kind of the sign that we're going to be quite guard heavy this year, we're going to kind of base our kind of play style around all these guards and kind of interchange them a lot and kind of keep teams guessing. And yeah, I'm not kind of too sure, but I do think a trade is possibly incoming. Obviously, we got rid of Garrett Temple. We declined his option, and he's since went to the Bulls, as we said last week. But even still, we've got quite a lot of guards on the roster at the moment, and whether any of them are just going to kind of be trade bait, I'm not too sure. But going kind of back to Johnson, yeah, I'm really happy with him kind of being there as that kind of second or third option, as we've already said.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think so. Just to confirm, he has come in on a vet's minimum, so it's the same contract as Jeff Green has just come in on. And I think he'll definitely be that third string, that third option at point guard, although he can play shooting guard as well. So he's a nice kind of just utility guard to have on a teeny tiny contract. I was having a look at his just the stats he put up, in that really, really limited bubble window that we had him on the Nets, and his assist to turnover ratio was really good. I think he averaged something like 3 assists, and it was only sort of half a turnover a game. So you sort of double that. You sort of combine that with that kind of hot shooting. then it feels just like a nice, safe pair of hands where if, hopefully in next season where we build up a bit of a lead and we put that kind of those second and third units out on the floor just to give our starters a bit of a break, then it would just be a nice kind of safe pair of hands to have on the court, really. Although people have flagged up that he's a bit of a turnstile on the defensive end. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to look at, really. But unfortunately, he might be a bit more of a speed bump for offenses than Chris Chioza might be. But I still hold out hope. That we're going to see Cheese in a Nets uniform. But talking about defense, we've got again officially officially signed this week is Bruce Brown. Obviously came to us as part of the Musa deal to Detroit. So another trade that became official as he spoke to the media. He's been described as a barnacle on defense, which I thought was just the best way to describe just a really annoying, pesky, sticky kind of defender. So I don't know if you guys caught what he had to say to the media, but I loved what I saw from Bruce Brown.
As did I.
Sorry, on you go, Cammy.
So yeah, I mean, I think some of the comments you've mentioned, one of them there, one of the ones that kind of stood out to me was, I just come in and bring a dog mentality on the defensive end and match up with the best defensive player every night. And I think this shows that he's clearly confident in his own abilities. Obviously, maybe not one of the most well-known players around the league, but this is a player who wants to come in and challenge himself. He's not scared, and I think that simply says a lot about the kind of players we are bringing in. They're wanting to be here. They're really wanting to challenge, and I think a lot of that perhaps has to do with both KD and Kyrie being there. These players are wanting to up their game. They're wanting to share the court with these two superstars, and Brown's attitude is fantastic, and that's the kind of attitude that I personally want to see in players, and I'd imagine that'll be the same for you, Per.
Yeah, Brown's an interesting one. I think you need guys like kind of Bruce Brown on the team if you want to actually win it all. Bearing in mind this is actually only his third season that we're going into. I was laughing actually last night. I was listening to the Glue Guys podcast this week, and they were talking about Bruce Brown, and they were saying, like, look, we're not going to lie and say that we watch loads of Detroit basketball. And I was thinking, no, it's 100%. But there was one game that I did watch Bruce Brown in that was live on Sky, and he was playing against James Harden against the Rockets. And he gave Harden so much trouble. I watched that game to watch James Harden, and Bruce Brown was just cancelling him out, and it was great to see. I think it was his rookie year, actually. And you love to see that. I love players that rise to the occasion when they're playing against stars, and it's like, I don't care who you are. I'm going to give absolutely everything to it. And I think I think there was one article that was calling him, saying they had a dog mentality, and I love that. I think it's like a rugged dog mentality, like that Damari Carroll kind of vibe. And I think he's going to be absolutely great. Another game as well that I watched him in was when he played against Caris LeVert last year, I think, actually. I say last year, it's last season. It was like November 2019. And and they took Caris LeVert off in the fourth quarter just because he was causing them so much trouble. And for a guy so young, it's nice to see his confidence in that kind of setting against like kind of the better players in the league. And I think offensively as well, I think he's decent. You can see a nice increase from like the last few seasons. I think last year he got about 8 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. And if that's, say, your third option off shooting guard or something like that, you can't argue with those numbers with a kind of showing up on different areas of the stat sheet. And he seems to be that type of guy that he doesn't actually need to appear on the stat sheet to have an impact on the game, kind of just causing problems in defence. And I think he's got a decent offensive game as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it'll kind of bring that David Nwaba energy to this team that we had last year, obviously before he sadly got that season-ended injury. But yeah, just to be so, like you say, to be so young and to be so clear on what your role is and just to be completely bought into that. I think I saw one of the other quotes he said was, I don't need to score the ball. That's KD and Kyrie's job. I'm here to just be that dog. And like he said, like you both said, be that dog on defense. And I love that. I love that he's coming and he's owning that. And he's just like, all I'm here to do is to make sure you don't score. And I love that. That's so, so cool. And to have that to have that mentality even before you've met your teammates, even before you've had a practice with anyone, and just to kind of have that sort of buy into the philosophy to your new team that has championship aspirations after spending your first 2 years in the NBA in Detroit, which, you know, to be kind to them, don't have championship aspirations at the moment, I think is just incredible. So I'm forever the optimist, but I got really high hopes for Bruce Brown, just because I think as Nets fans, we've been screaming out for that defense, especially in the guards. So out of the million guards we have, he might be our best option on defense. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what he brings. But talking about roster additions and things like that, the Nets over this past week have signed 2 Exhibit 10 deals. So basically an Exhibit 10 deal is essentially you can come to training camp. Teams can bring 20 players to training camp before having to trim the fat to 15 players, and they have until the day before opening night to make those cuts. Gents, what did you see of the new additions?
Are you wanting to pick any of the 2 in particular, Aidan, or?
No, on you go, mate. On you go.
So, right. I'll go with Nate Sestina then, obviously, a 23-year-old 6'9" power forward who can also play centre. Went undrafted in this year's draft, spent 2019-20 with the Kentucky Wildcats, and was in the second team for All Patriot League in 2019. Didn't start all that much last year, which kind of concerned me a little bit. 7 starts in 31 games, which isn't exactly fantastic and doesn't maybe say a lot about him as a player, but the fact we've still brought him in, and I think this also goes for Jordan Bowden as well, the fact that the front office have brought these guys in suggests to me they've clearly seen something they like, and obviously there's no guarantee that this is going to lead to a contract for them. Obviously, as you said, Matt, it's essentially a training camp invite, this Exhibit 10 deal, but if they are signed and then even get put to the Long Island Nets, I mean, yeah, they can get a wee bit of money from that as well. And I can't say I'm too familiar with either player, but I'm confident, given the kind of smart nature of Marks in the front office, that there's something about these players and they wish to explore it. And when it doesn't hurt, they're not having to pay these guys. They're coming in, seeing what they're like. If they're no good, they get cut. There's nothing kind of bad about this. So yeah, interested to kind of see how the pair of them do in kind of camp and whatnot.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I was hearing you to say what an Exhibit 10 contract exactly is, Matt. It sounds so much more interesting than it actually is. Do you know what I think? It sounds something so it's like, oh wow, an Exhibit 10 contract, that sounds really good, but there's nothing much to it really. Yeah,
it could just be a WhatsApp, couldn't it? Just like, yeah, here's the date, here's the time. It's just like ordering an Uber. It's just like, be here at this time.
I feel like it should be in like a museum or something like that, an Exhibit 10, like something top secret. But no, it's a great opportunity for these guys. I mean, I think like these type of contracts in the NBA are great because it gives the players that maybe go undrafted that opportunity. There's still that hope. You don't need to lose all hope after it. I was having a quick look recently, actually, as players who have been Exhibit 10 contracts, and Chris Josa, he actually started as an Exhibit 10 for, I can't remember who that was for, and Kendrick Nunn as well, who played quite a big part in the Heat last year. He was an Exhibit 10, so it just shows you there's that pathway to the league. Yeah, as Cammy said, it's a great way to gain knowledge from like vets on a good team. I think if you can get these players around your Kyrie Irvings and your Kevin Durant's, I mean, you're laughing really in terms of experience. But I think there's a good chance that both these guys will probably end up in Long Island, which isn't a bad thing as well. I mean, Long Island seem to have a really good kind of coaching staff, and with that connection to the Nets, there's definitely going to be that crossover where they can kind of have that opportunity, which we've obviously seen with some guys already. Yeah, as Cammy said as well, I've not had a great look at the 2 guys. I've looked at kind of Bowden. He looks like another 3-and-D guy. He apparently should have been drafted, which is always good to see. We kind of hear so many guys that go, oh, he should have been in the second round, and he seems like one of those guys. And Sean Marks is really good at picking them, so let's hope that something comes for them. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't come into fruition for them, it's a great opportunity at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think just like you said, just speaking to kind of Sean Marks's sort of just basketball IQ, obviously it's through the roof, but So Nate Sestina's a power forward who shot 40% from three, which was the second best on a Kentucky team. I don't follow college basketball at all, but I know enough to know Kentucky are often a great team. So that looks really good. We've been kind of saying that a bigger player to kind of spread the floor is what we need. And again, this Jordan Bowden is shot 38.3% from the field, only 28% from free, but he's known for his basketball IQ and quick hands on the defensive end. So bigs that can spread the floor and defensive-minded guards is something that Nets Twitter have been absolutely apoplectic about recently, especially in off-season. So it looks like they're filling needs while, maybe another section of the front office might be thinking about superstar blockbuster trades. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, exciting times.
In fact, before we move on, I'll let you finish, but I've got to jump in with another point. So something that I'd kind of noticed was the fact they're both 23 years old, and obviously we drafted Reggie Perry. We obviously didn't take a pick at 19, but I think this also kind of says about us wanting kind of players for now. 23 years old, they've kind of both had 3 or 4 years at college by this stage, and they're a lot more further along in their development than some of these guys who are drafted. So perhaps that is the explanation why we never picked someone at 19. Also, we took Perry, who was one and done, maybe two and done. But yeah, I think it certainly says a lot about the kind of team we are, as everyone knows, in win now mode. And if you can add in someone who's a wee bit further along than a kind of promising 18, 19-year-old who might not be ready for a few more years when our championship window could be goosed or kind of done. I mean, I can completely understand why we went down this route.
Yeah, it's nice. It's just, I think maybe because the Nets have had so much practice of not being able to make moves in a traditional way and offering draft picks to people in trades, they've had to be a bit sneakier and kind of make these additions around the edges and yeah, just you can obviously harvest as many undrafted talents as you can. So yeah, it remains to be seen. But the roster seems to be padding out quite nicely. But before we do take another deep dive into the roster, just I think yesterday evening, so maybe early hours of this morning, UK time, the pre-season schedule got announced. So the Nets will open the 2020-2021 season with 2 games against the Wizards and the Celtics. How do you guys feel about that? Obviously, only 2 games. Should it be more? Who knows? What was your first impressions?
I mentioned that to you guys last night. The Nets seem to always have slightly less games than everyone else. I don't know if it's something like they're trying to keep their cards close to their chest and they don't want to show too much what they have before things start to matter, or I think that's probably what it is, as well as probably they've got that much depth in the team that they feel that their training matches that they have and things like that is enough practice for the team, which is fine as well. Really excited, to be honest with you. It was nice to know, because I was looking at my calendar on my phone, it's only a couple of weeks away until we see it. Really, really excited. 2 quite interesting matchups as well. Thinking that probably Wall and Beal will be healthy for Washington. And obviously we didn't see much of Kyrie. Did we see Kyrie at all against Boston last year? I don't think we did. I think he was out for every single one.
He bottled it.
Yeah, that's what they were saying, didn't they?
Bottled it by getting shoulder surgery.
Exactly, I know. Oh, don't get me started. But Boston fans. But no, I think it's going to be great. It's 2 decent tests. I just think that it's going to be a great opportunity to see the guys and see how it's going to work out. Because there's still that talk about who's going to start, who's going to come off the bench, who's going to be the guys at the end of the bench. There's still a lot of question marks around the team. 2 good warm-up matches, I'd say.
I'm the same. Happy with the pair of them, obviously, as Aidan says, probably keeping our kind of cards close to our chest, and understandably so. We've got big expectations, big aspirations, and why should we let all these other teams kind of in on our secrets early doors? I think another thing, what I said to the pair of you was, we're wanting to see these stars play more meaningful games. Who cares about pre-season games? Obviously, it's nice to see the kind of team back in action, but I'd far rather have, like, say, Kyrie and KD available for 2 games that actually matter than have them get injured in pre-season or just play 2 meaningless pre-season games and it cost him 2 games at some point in the season. So, well, I'm saying 2 games. It could ultimately be more depending on kind of injuries and whatnot. So, yeah, I think the 2 games will pose interesting tests for us. Obviously, as Aidan says, the Wizards should have Beal and Wall. Obviously, Wall's been out for, the best part of 2 years now. And yeah, and Beal, a player that we've been linked with for quite a long time. So it'll be interesting to see them. And obviously, I don't think the Celtics really need any introduction. Lots of stars in that team and a really good team. And one of the kind of teams that I expect to kind of be challenging us kind of up at the top of the East in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite a nice balance, because you think against the Wizards, obviously they've sort of been the Eastern Conference whipping boys for a little while, just being that kind of doormat team that people can kind of just go in and sort of expect to win. So it'd be nice to kind of show off our offensive capabilities against Washington, whereas it's obviously going to be a much sterner test against Boston. So we might need to show off our defensive schemes and defensive chops and stuff. And maybe that's the game that Bruce Brown will become everybody's favorite net. We'll have to wait and see.
I quite like as well. I'm going to miss this year the random friendlies that some teams usually have. It's like that Brazilian mob that we played last year. It's like that guy. It's like a 35-year-old power forward that like got like a 30 and 20 game. It's like, yeah, that's like the fun of like the pre-season. I know, that was it. And like your kind of European teams coming over. Yeah, we'll miss that this year definitely. But yeah, again, it'll be interesting just to see, because I think some teams have got like 5 pre-season games. So I don't know why they've got that many games, but yeah, it'll be interesting.
Maybe it's a rust thing, but I think the Nets were slated to go to Oz, I think, pre-season, or like really? Sort of Australia, New Zealand, because I remember the obviously people were talking about the whole Shawn Marks connection. But yeah, maybe if you play a ton of preseason games, maybe people are worried about maybe these teams that haven't played since March maybe need a little bit of time to get sort of back into game shape, but we shall see. So moving on from the preseason schedule, with training camp not a million miles away, it's a couple of days away as we record this, starts on December the 1st. I couldn't help but notice a lot of chat on Twitter about what our roster looks like and our depth chart. And Billy Reinhart from Nets Daily posted what his thoughts for the Nets depth chart would look like. And considering a lot of people have sort of said that the Nets have failed this offseason, I think it looks pretty healthy. So what I thought I'd do is take this opportunity to chat with Cammy and Aidan about how we see this this team piecing together, really. So as I say, Billy for the starters, went with Kyrie Irving at point guard. Then he went for Karis LeVert at the 2, Joe Harris, KD, and DJ as your starting 5. How does that sort of grab you guys? Is that about right?
Yeah, that lines up with kind of what I've got down in my notes. I think that is the strongest starting 5 we can play. And I mean, you were saying there about kind of people saying we've failed. I mean, I think people are forgetting the team's actually pretty decent already. It didn't really need too much done. Obviously, it was nice to have the Harden links, and whether that's going to happen, I really don't know now. But yeah, I mean, the team's good. I mean, I don't think we can really say we failed. I don't know if people are maybe just saying failed because it was the Harden, the Beal, the kind of everyone we were linked with, and we never got them. But the team's good. It's a championship caliber team. I don't know why people are complaining too much.
Yeah, I completely stand by what I said last week. I think that starting 5, I totally agree, by the way, that is probably going to be our starting 5 on opening night. I would say it's the best team in the league, in my opinion, in terms of starting 5 in the league. I think player that when you put in KD at the 4, there's always that talking point. He's just back off a really serious injury. Should he be guarding kind of big 4s, big muscly 4s? But he's 6 foot, to be fair. His listed height's probably not right. He's probably 7 foot. And I think someone like DeAndre Jordan next to him as well, it's a good front court. And because he's slightly thinner, it should be absolutely fine. But that's our highest paid players as well. So it lines up well for our starting 5, as in the players that are getting paid the most should be the players that are playing the most minutes. I think that will be our team on opening night. I still have a query. I still query that should Jordan be starting there? Should it be Jarrett Allen in there? I think that he would probably he could be a better option in there, but I think that just the way things are with KD, Kyrie, DeAndre Jordan, I think it's looking more and more likely that that's going to be the starting five.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like everyone's saying. I don't want it to come across as negative because I don't think it, it's just the way basketball works. And I think DeAndre Jordan's put a career together to afford him certain luxuries of kind of demanding the contract he got, demanding some playing time, and I think that's absolutely fine when the other person, as good as Jarrett Allen is a 22-year-old guy in his third year, maybe fourth year. So I don't see it as a bad thing. I'm not as low on DJ as other people are. And just going back to what you said about KD sort of defending the fours, it's just like a lot of people are saying we need a power forward, a defensive power forward who can stop a four. It's just like we don't necessarily need a power forward who can defend the four. We just need to, as a team, be able to defend the perimeter effectively. So I think maybe whether or not if KD doesn't have the better of his man on a given night, maybe he switches out to like a small ball five, and then whoever's playing the five might be able to go switch out onto the perimeter. Maybe a slim down vegan DJ might be moving a little bit more quickly than he might be in the past, and maybe that's what he does his job. But yeah, I think again with you guys, I think it was quite clear what our starting five is. Obviously, depending on health, this is obviously always the massive thing, especially seemingly with the Brooklyn Nets. But let's go on to this second unit. So headed up by what often a lot of people are saying is going to be the six man of the year candidate, Spencer Dinwiddie, running things, with Landry Shamet with him, along with Taurean Prince at the 3, Jeff Green at the 4, and Jarrett Allen as the center on that second unit. To me, that looks like a decent second unit. Obviously, we've got a lot to see from Shamet and Jeff Green, but Spencer, obviously, borderline all-star last year. Jarrett Allen, we've waxed lyrical about a lot. A lot of people talk smack on Taurean Prince, but he was asked to play the 4 at times last year, and that's just not what he does. So hoping for a bit of a resurgence from him and maybe playing a bit closer to his Atlanta days. But how does that second unit grab you guys?
Yeah, I think that team is good enough to finish in the 8th spot in the East, to be honest with you. I'm really happy with it. It's obviously you going back to saying what Billy from Nets Daily tweeted. I looked at it for ages. I was like looking at that tweet going like, that's such a deep team. And I'm thinking like those 5 guys on the bench there that they've listed could all easily be starters on other teams, I think. I think Spencer is going to give us such a great option off the bench again. I think if Spencer doesn't take a leap this year, he's still going to be such a good option off the bench. I worry slightly about him in the fact that I think if he's given slightly less minutes this year, he won't be as happy. He's my only worry this year of happiness on the team, because I think he does think he can be a starter, and I think there's a lot of people out there that can. But in terms of off the bench, if he's happy in that position, we're laughing, because he is such a good option at that point guard off the bench. Shamet's going to give us great shooting off the bench. I think Prince this year will take a huge elevation compared to last year due to the strength of the team. I think when he played with Kyrie last year was when we saw his best minutes. He was at some points the second option for shooting on that team. Green is going to give us that defensive stability that we didn't have in the last few years at the 4. And then Allen, yeah, I just think Jarrett Allen's going to be great this year. I think if we do trade Jarrett Allen, we're going to regret it. I think he's going to take a big leap this year, and I think he could potentially be the most improved player in the league this year.
That's a good shout. I mean, I think I agree with all barring the two guard. I don't know if this is just kind of due to his recent comments, and I've kind of fallen in love with him a wee bit, but part of me wants to see Bruce Brown be that second guy. As I say, I'm not too sure if it is just because of my kind of newfound love for him, but I mean, him or Shamet starting kind of as that second string, we're sorted either way. It's not a bad option to have, and it's maybe going to be the case that depending on who we're kind of playing against, they will kind of interchange between who's kind of the second and the third option against the games. And I mean, I think that can go for quite a few positions in the team. We'll maybe see likes of Jarrett Allen swap in when games aren't maybe so suited for DJ. And yeah, I think going back to what Joe Harris said, I didn't mention this earlier on, but I think he mentioned something about us being positionless as well. So that certainly is quite interesting for me, because there's a lot of players in that squad who can be really versatile. And yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see. I think it's quite easy for us to sit here now and say, this will be the starting five, this will be the next, and then this will be the next. But yeah, I think a positionless might not be too bad. There, as I say, lots of versatile players there, and I think that can only benefit us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with this second unit, what sort of jumps out to me is if anyone in that kind of starting five went down injured or was resting or something, I think you wouldn't mind any of those names kind of stepping up to their sort of sister position in that first lineup, which I think again speaks to just how deep a team we are. I remember I was chatting to Dan from the Miami Heat UK, who he put out a depth chart for the Heat, and obviously we know how sort of where they went last season. So obviously it's a very, very, very good team. And he kind of questioned and said, who's got a deeper team than the Heat this year? And I kind of sort of just put my hand up and was like, that's a pretty deep. And he sort of did agree, to be fair to him. So I think we've got players, we've got teams across the league looking over their shoulder at how deep this Nets team is. So it's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, just going back to what Cammy was saying about the whole positionless basketball. I think we're so quick to look at a depth chart in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but I think we're seeing more and more with the moves that the Nets are making that it's just going to be guards and bigs. I think it could be at times that they're playing like 5 guards. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen that. I mean, especially under Kenny Atkinson, he was not afraid to chuck 5 guards out there. We saw Jill Harris like playing the 5 at times. It's just anything can happen. And I saw a great tweet, just to mention a guy that's fantastic on Twitter. There's a guy called Brooklyn's Beat. Puts out some really interesting points, times controversial. But he put out a tweet earlier that really got me thinking about the Lakers. Because everyone was saying, who's going to guard AD? Who's going to guard LeBron? But he said, let them worry about us. And I really like that. Let them worry about us. We've put out the best 5 players we have, and they can worry about how they're going to defend us. How's Anthony Davis going to defend the speed of our best 5 players? And it was a great point, because I kept thinking, I was like, who are we going to play that's going to guard AD or guard LeBron? It's like, let them worry about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. It's such a good point. And I think that positionless basketball comes into play there, where if you play the best 5 players in your team, offensively, you're not going to have an issue. Defensively, that's where there's a few questions. But if you're that good offensively, you don't really need to worry too much about it at the other end. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a wicked way to look at it. Love that. So if we have a look at the towards the end of the bench, talking obviously about positionless basketball, we've got a couple of players in this sort of resulting 5 that have all played sort of maybe 4 and 5 for us last year. But rounding out the end of the rotation is Tyler Johnson, Bruce Brown, TLC, Rodion Kurucs, and Nicholas Claxton. And again, if that's our 3rd string team, that's not a bad place to be. Obviously, Bruce Brown, as we said, we all really, really like the look of. TLC had a really good bubble, I think. He was super streaky, but when he was on, he was absolutely on fire. Rhodey obviously took a little bit of a backward step last season. Obviously, he's got a lot of stuff going on off the court, which hopefully, I don't know what the latest on that getting resolved is going to be. But everyone seems to be high on Nick Claxton. So yeah, what do you guys think about the rounding out at the bottom of that potential garbage time lineup?
I think we've got some all right options there. It's nothing to really shout home about, but as I've mentioned Claxton, obviously I think we're all quite keen to see him develop. I think he kind of showed a kind of wee glimpse of what he can be last year, and it's maybe a bit unfortunate he finds himself behind so many players kind of at that centre position, because I think he could be a really decent player for us one day. Obviously, whether we keep him or not, he could always end up in a trade, and one of these kind of bottom end of the bench guys could well be traded. Obviously, as we've always said, if there's the right move, we're going to make it, and we might just need a wee kind of filler here or there. But I mean, it's not the kind of worst kind of third options or whatever. So yeah, I think I'm fairly happy with kind of the third options and just where the roster sits in general at the moment. But wouldn't be opposed to any improvements if they can be made.
Yeah, I think going on from what you said earlier, Matt, in terms of if there was an injury in the starters, any of those guys in the seconds could certainly come in there. I think it's the same again. I mean, those 5 players that are mentioned, they could easily be on the bench, like good bench pieces for a lot of teams in the NBA. Yeah, I think there's some great option there. So I think Claxton's a really interesting one because I think it's such a shame that he didn't make the bubble because I think he would have really benefited from those minutes. But I still think Claxton could see some minutes in Long Island this year just because that they're going off for the title. But he's certainly got that. I actually see him as a 4 instead of a 5, just because of his shooting ability, which we saw a few times last year. He's someone that I'm really, really excited about, and I worry that if they do make a trade, that is someone that they could certainly put in that trade just as a filler piece. But yeah, no, you're spot on. I'd say TLC had some really good minutes in the bubble, and he deserves to certainly get some minutes this year. Someone like Bruce Brown, it's incredible that we're talking about him being in our kind of third string because he's a really, really good player. And I don't think he'll be a third stringer. I think you'll see that kind of those minutes maybe at the end of the second. He might even see some minutes in the fourth quarter just purely because of his defensive ability. But some great options there, and that's it. It's the worry, as I mentioned last week, I think it was, is that a big trade would kill a lot of the depth. But you look at that team, and you've got to say that it's the deepest team in the league. You have to look at it and say it's the deepest team in the league over 15 spots.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's definitely a nice position to be in, like I say, and unless something bonkers happens when we end up being involved in sending 3 or 4 players somewhere else, which, you know, Sean Marks has kind of said when he was talking to the press that it isn't on the cards. Yeah, I think we're in a pretty nice position. Well, lads, I think that's, unless there's anything else that has caught your eye this week, I think that's about all we got time for. So I'm going to say we're going to do a little tease, but now sort of obviously these come out every weekend. So by the time we come around next week, the Brooklyn Nets would have been in training camp. So we're going to have a little bit of a better idea of how players are looking, what kind of tactics we might be doing, how Steve Nash and his new coaching staff are looking on the sidelines. And we're going to be taking a deeper dive into our roster, breaking down the Nets into their different tiers of kind of a bit sort of going off what we've been talking about just now. But we're also going to have a little bit of a deeper dive on what we're thinking we might see from each player and what they might need to do to take a step forward and how they can contribute to a Nets successful season. So yeah, thanks very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.